Hi, my name is Keisha Ernst, and I'm one of the owners at Catalyst Bioamendments. We are a small scale, mid scale compost production facility in Northern California. We've been in production now for 5 years, and when we started, composting wasn't necessarily our goal. We wanted to be soil food web consultants. We wanted to work with farmers, ranchers, at home gardeners, and other compost producers to help them create ecosystems within their soil, within their products. That are quite diverse and I guess you could say interesting to look at underneath a microscope. Um, we didn't, like I said, we didn't necessarily want to produce compost, but the hand turned piles that we were making at home just weren't, it just wasn't enough for the scale of work that we were trying to do. And so our compost lot where we work, although I like to use all types of composting, static, vermicomposting, all of that, we found that thermophilic composting was the best way for us to grow the microorganisms we need and to do it in a timely fashion. So I've been asked to come here today to talk to you about thermophilic compost and why you might choose that for your operation over other methodologies that are available. Now, let's see. There's a lot of reasons why we like thermophilic. I will say that it is hard to get a permit for thermophilic composting. I'll just start with the hard part, especially in California. At scale, if you're going to sell the product, it is difficult to be able to get permissions to heat it up. But if you can, I feel like it is a really good option. And especially if you're composting at home, composting food waste, composting on a community level, I think thermophilic can be a great option because you probably don't need a permit. So our compost, we're looking for something a little bit different than your typical facility. We really want every single bag of compost that comes off of our lot to be able to put underneath a microscope and to be able to see lots of diverse microorganisms. And that's, we use our data collection to guide our processes to make sure that this is a truth for us. So when we look under the microscope, we're going to see fungi, we're going to see bacteria, we're going to see lots of predatory organisms like amoeba and flagellates. We're also going to see nematodes, all different kinds of nematodes thriving there. So what we want is when we're looking, through our microscope, we want to see a thriving community with our eyes every single time we look. And so a big thing here is timing, right? So, static composting can take a long time, maybe even up to a year and a half. Thermophilic composting is actually very, very quick. From the moment that we build our piles, that heat that's generated by the microorganisms splitting, it breaks down the materials quite quickly. So when you're looking at this picture right here of this window that was just built, it's brand new. It's never been turned before, and you can clearly see the grass. You can see the manure. You can see the wood chips. Within one turn, which might happen within 24 to 48 hours, it's already starting to look like compost. By turn 3, it looks very much like compost. And then as we finish up our regulation turns, finish out that temperature, if we're lucky, it's just a few weeks of turning and really, really strenuous monitoring. So every day we're going to come in, we're going to look in the morning. Sometimes we even look in the afternoon or the evening to see where our temperatures are at, and making sure that we're turning at the exact, right time. Now, a lot of times, the idea is to make compost as fast as you can so you can sell it as quickly as possible. So, if you're starting a compost lot and that's your goal is to get your materials in and get them off the lot and sold quickly, I still would say thermophilic is the best option. For us, we like to get it all done at once and then just be spending the rest of the year babysitting, a massive amount of compost by watering it, checking it with a microscope. For us, that's the easiest way. But even in a typical high production fashion where you're trying to get it in and get it out, I think that's why thermophilic is often chosen as the means to do that type of composting. Um, There's other things to consider too, besides just how fast it is to move it on and off your lot. Composting, if you're composting static and you've ever had, an at home food waste pile and you put those pumpkin scraps in the fall, whether you want them to or not, in the spring, you're usually going to see a nice little pumpkin patch growing out of your compost pile. And so, whether we're talking about weed seeds or, seeds of the crop that we've just grown, typically we don't want to see those kinds of plants growing in a compost that we're selling to someone. When someone buys our compost, we really want them to be able to take it home, put it in their garden, bury it into their soil, and not worry about some sort of unwanted pest or even food seed or flower seed popping up in that compost. So when we're holding the compost at a high temperature for that many days, it is actually cooking off those seeds and killing them, while still maintaining an environment where the microorganisms can thrive. Now, another thing that we want to look at is pathogen. So when we're talking about food scraps, manure, literally any organic material could have, plant pathogen or human pathogen on it. And so, when we're using vermicomposting, when we're using static composting, those pathogens will get dealt with eventually, but it takes a lot of time, like I mentioned before. With this kind of heat, we're going to be killing off all those human pathogens, all those plant pathogens, and kind of resetting a stage for the microorganisms that we want to grow to come back very quickly. When the temperatures are quite high, there's a lot of bacterial growth going on, but maybe not so much of the fungal growth and, seeing those predatory organisms and nematodes growing. So we want the temperature to go from high down to low and to actually ambient as quickly as possible. Because at that point, we've dealt with our seeds, we've dealt with our pathogens, and we're, able to move that compost out the door, or at least start investing in following it and its life with our microscope. Now you might be wondering, how does this heat work? How is it killing, just the pathogens? And that answer is, I find it to be quite interesting that pathogenic organisms are planning on living their life out inside a host. So they don't have these incredibly strong structures that will withstand things like this high intensity heat. Where a lot of these other microorganisms, they are free living, they're out in the soil, they're moving around every day in a wild environment. They're evading predators, they're having to capture their own food. They need to really invest in their own structure so that they can make it, out into the wild, out in the compost pile, so to speak, long enough to reproduce and to, continue their lives. And so that is why that heat is going to take these, the bad guys, so to speak, or the organisms that we really just don't want to see pressure from in our crops or pressure from in our bodies. That's why we can see them disappear so quickly. Now, again, I want to remind you that there are lots of ways to grow microorganisms. There are a lot of ways to compost. And not everybody that's out there composting is trying to make a product that's exactly like ours. For you, the mission might be to just divert as much organic material from the landfill as possible. And so, when we're doing that, still, I think all of these ideas are kind of pointing towards your case, right? Like, if you want to take, thousands and thousands of pounds of food waste and turn it into a safe organic material that can be used by farmers, and you want to do it really quickly, Thermophilic compost is going to be it. I don't know if you've ever had, and perhaps you have had the opportunity of having a big pile of food waste near your house. Even if you cover it with wood chips and you buffer it, you're going to see the critters start to come in. You're going to see the rats, you're going to see the crows, all kinds of birds and animals are going to come in to try to get that food resource. And, that's also something that we're not necessarily wanting on our compost lot. And so, this is a way, if you can imagine, the compost pile is going to get so hot within 48 to 72 hours that food gets cooked. And then, like I said, on turn 2 or 3, it actually already looks like compost. So, if you can imagine a watermelon going from a watermelon into a bag of compost in just a couple months, I think that that's useful for anyone who's trying to work with organic materials. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.